Well, well, well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is you ingratiate us. Before we get started, let me first say happy heavenly birthday to my mother. May 3rd is her birthday, and we're gonna get right at it. And I'm going to say a few things because uh, I've been receiving, these distress calls since the 29th. Your right to vote as Black folks is not associated with legislation. It's associated with the Constitution Amendment. That's the 15th Amendment. Now, so let's forget that. You're going to be able to vote. The decision that you dealt with on the 29th of April in the gerrymandering issue will only affect the House of Representatives. So you still can vote on the president, your local elections, your state legislatures. That'll affect the way they're composed in the houses there. But the senatorial races, those are all unaffected. You still have your local issues. So let's get the language straight. I am not going to belabor the point very long, because I want to hand this over. And you all have heard about all of the riots in Chinatown since the 29th because oh, wait a minute. They haven't rioted because they control their communities. So I'm not going to, so they don't give a darn about what the legislature does with respect to not even legislature. This is a Supreme Court sponsored hit job. Once again, showing you that you're at war. So yeah, I just wanted to add that and open it up that of course we did have this ruling on the 29th of April in which the Supreme Court has essentially eviscerated Section 2 of the Voters' Rights Act. What is the Voters' Rights Act? The Voters' Rights Act is legislation that was enacted in order to protect the right of the 15th Amendment um, uh, uh, right to vote. So what it does is it outlaws illegal activities such as illegal discriminatory activities such as poll tax, such as literacy tests, those things that disenfranchise the vote. It has nothing to do with your legal right to vote, but everything to do but with a number of things to do with your disenfranchisement and your dilution of the votes. So that's what it is. And I read this opinion, and the word of the week last week by Dr. Alexander was farcical. And that's what Alito's opinion on this issue so squarely fits. It was a farcical opinion. It was written in a juvenile manner, and I think Mike Jones described it best as uh, as an example of essentially white supremacy being the tune of the day. So I'm going to open it up to the panel. We are joined this morning by our full complement, the Mike Jones, the Dr. Charles Alexander, and Jerry L. Kwame Christmas. And as we approach this, I just want to open it up so we can begin the dialogue. And as this spills into what we should be doing and solutions for us going forward. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as I go through that dialogue, I'll call, what I just did dialogue. What comes to mind as we contemplate? Well, I'm not even going to say that because Dr. Alexander brought it to our attention that another farcical opinion was disseminated by the Supreme Court 100 years ago. Once again, exemplifying what we're dealing with. And for those of us that were naive enough to believe that the Supreme Court is an apolitical entity, I'd like to get your temperature today.
I'll start because I'm old enough to forget if I don't write it down and don't say it first. Uh, for me, I'm more focused on us than them. Okay, first of all, there's not a whole lot you can say about them that we haven't already said and hasn't been said for the last 150 years. So that's not news. And I'm kind of working on a piece that I hope to finish today because I've moved in and out on it with a couple basic things. But uh, I think probably I know people who might listen to this. Uh, there are some that will be familiar with this. And did you three brothers watch the Game of Thrones?
I did not.
I
You
did
I
did
not.
not,
didn't either.
I did
huh?
not. I did not.
Okay. Well, the Game of Thrones, literally from the first episode, and the show ran for 8 years, and you really didn't get the meaning of what I was about to say, the visual meaning of it, but it was a constant in the show. And the constant was this phrase, winter is coming. Okay. And it was the motto of the House of Stark, who was one of the major protagonists, and they were the most put upon, and that was their motto. And winter is coming was a metaphor for some real bad shit that's gonna happen. Okay, I don't know what day it's gonna happen, but it's gonna happen, and we have to be ready for winter. Okay, that everything you do today is about the reality that winter is coming. And I'm going to take that, explain it a little bit, and say in America, since we've been here, we've been the house of start. And throughout our entire existence, winter is coming. No matter what historical epoch we're in, it's go get bad. Now it might not got bad on your watch, but they used to have this group that sat on this wall. They were brothers. They were called Brothers of the Night Watch. Okay, and basically, from where the worst of the worst would come from, they manned the wall literally for life, and their thing was winter's coming, and this is where we have to be prepared to try to stop it. Now it's 2 years worth of coinage and 3 4 years worth of coinage and a whole bunch of shit. So it would be mindful of what can happen to you in America. My my problem is our inability and unwillingness to recognize that for us, that winter is coming. And we're never, or we haven't been, and I would argue up until civil rights, generationally, basically, we all always knew winter was coming, and getting ready for what could happen was the intergenerational transmission that was passed down. And our generation, you guys are almost as old as me, but I'm gonna specifically say my generation is we disrupted the transmission. The reason nobody knows when it's coming now is because we didn't tell nobody. Our happy asses went on and we got to be Jay-Z and Barack Obama and millionaire basketball players and movie stars, and we was all over the fucking place. And we done forgot all about the night what the brothers on the wall at the night watch. Matter of fact, ain't nobody there no more. And so white folks show up like white folks gonna show up because they historically have showed up like this throughout American history. So I think, Charles, they call this pattern recognition, right? That's something you taught me about, right? Shit. And matter of fact, that's how you know you learning, that you can recognize
Yes.
and categorize what's happening because it's happened before, not literally, but something like this under this set of circumstances seems to be a regular occurrence. So since it seems to be a regular occurrence in the past, you can infer it's probably going to be at some point in the future go happen again. But and we have to get over our enchantment with Barack Obama, and you really can't afford to take Obama's view of America because he loves his mama. His mama loved him, but his mother wasn't your mother, okay? And
You
I'm
right
not
about
not.
that?
And I ain't knocking the brother for that, okay? He's supposed to try to figure out a way to rationalize why his mother's okay. All right. And that means his mother's people, which is part of his people. Okay. So that I wouldn't have to, you know what, as confusing as it is to be black in America, it must be real confusing for him. Okay. To reconcile the irreconcilable. Okay. And so he says what he says, and we're supposed to say, we get you, brother. Don't worry about it. We got you too. Okay. uh, but our lack of discernment and our inability to focus on a long game and understand the pattern recognition of what it means to be black in America now has everybody in a state of shock of what we're going to do. So the reality is we've been in this situation before. I would suggest two things are in play that have not been in play before is at no time has white America been weaker, more intellectually intellectually vacuous and incompetent, and had their numbers the less. I mean, the country is not nearly as white as it was when they was raising hell and kicking ass for 250 years. But also, we've never been so unprepared, and therein is the problem. We like the Boston Celtics. See what happened to them last night. We got up 3 games to 1 and thought the series was over. Okay, and those white folks kept playing, and they got beat because they quit playing too early. Okay, and that all, you got to win 4 games. Okay, and for us in America, if when we in the playoffs, we ain't gonna never get to the 4th game. Okay, so you always got to play like you go get eliminated, and we were playing like we had already won. We had popped the champagne in game 4, in game 5 or 6, and boom. So for me, as the Chinese curse is attributed to them, we're getting ready to live in some interesting times, and we'll see. I mean, and it could very easily get a whole lot worse before it starts to get better, and it's not going to get better before we make it better. And one just how you got to learn to rethink your strategy when the circumstances change. Larry, your point was that you're still going to be able to vote. They're going to gerrymander the districts, and they're going to put all these black voters in these white spaces that are overwhelmingly Republican, and your vote, quote, won't matter in the general election. You never elect anybody black. I would read my Mao and Ho Chi Minh and Fidel Castro, and we ought to have guerrilla political war. I would have everybody black vote in the Republican primary. Okay, literally everybody black vote in the Republican primary, and you got one or two choices. You can vote for the worst, most incompetent white Republican that would be the easiest to beat in November, or you could vote for a Republican that is the weakest that they didn't want, but they couldn't win. So you could do in a Republican primary in one of those districts as black voters how we got leverage in the Democratic Party. We made the difference of who was the winner. So now that Republican, because of our nefarious mendacity, because I think that what I just said is evil, and it's what you could do. So there are any number of things like that allows you to be disruptive to their strategy. And I'll close on what Miles said about there are no wrong notes. It's what you play next. And life is all about not what you did, it's about what you're gonna do next. Because what happened has already happened. You don't get that one to do over. But you do get a chance to decide what the next one is. So to me, rather than lament all the bullshit that we just lost, we need to be figuring out how do you extend the fight and where is our leverage in this redefined arena. And that's just one idea about how you can be disruptive, because fundamentally how we got here was being disruptive. Nobody, they didn't say, oh man, we've really been messing over black folks for the last 150 years, and you count slavery, that's 400, we ought to do some shit better. No, we got in their ass. And us in their ass at the time we were in their ass created problems for them every place else. They didn't care about us, but it created problems internationally, other kinds of things. And so we had to deal with it. And
the thing about it is, Mike, the beauty of this show really is the continuity that you bring from the Bill Clays of the world, and beyond, as well as our full view of the historical arc. But had we paid attention to elders, I can tell you three right off the bat that have made it very, very clear to me that we never stop fighting. Locally, Reverend Andrew L. Smith and Reverend Glover, but nationally, Elijah Muhammad. They all said the same thing. The gains that you're going to make in the 1960s will be slowly eroded if you do not stay vigilant. Elijah Muhammad said he'll give you that. So what was that play? What did you just name with your last statement? Interest conversions.
right.
And so, when that dissipates, the interest that the public facing United States has, it has never changed. But our interest seems to be peace and tranquility. But we need to understand at all times that this is a war and that our opponent never stops. You gave an example the first time I ever heard you speak, which was we partner with the United States like herds partner to hunt. After we make the kill, you get in there and you fight for your aspect of it. But nobody's going to essentially, and I added, nobody's going to make you a plate. But we continue to think that somebody's going to make us a plate, and they are not, and you don't want what they're going to give us. Dr. Alexander, what say you at this point?
I agree with the Mike Jones, and I agree with you on and 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 I have the rate limiting point. Uh, so Mike Jones referenced pattern recognition, and then you referenced interest convergence. So I have another term to add. So this other term is perseveration. And this kind of works for
Uh-oh, we got two words that I've already added enchanted to the words of the week. So spell that one out for the folks that are sitting. I'm in
so
the T of the
perseveration.
classroom.
Perseveration. Perseveration. And this also, Mike Jones, works for the Boston Celtics. Perseveration, the uncontrollable repetition of words, actions, or thoughts despite the absence of a stimulus or reward. So that's like shooting threes when you can't make threes. It's the same thing. That's why and that's why Boston lost. And so, but that's what we do. And so for 50 years, we have been engaged in this process of perseveration, which it means that we can't turn it off. We can't switch. So we keep doing things that don't work.
Charles, just quick. What's Boston's coach name?
Joe Mazzulla.
Yeah, Joe
Mazzulla.
Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla coaches Black America. Tatum hurt. We ain't making threes, or even Orlando's coach on Thursday, Friday, whenever it was.
Yeah.
We're gonna go 1 for 24 in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Yeah, we gonna keep doing over and over. So if you're talking about leadership, I'm gonna let you get back to teaching.
That is it.
But this is when a high school coach would have said, "No, Tatum, I probably need to make some adjustments to how we play tonight. The ball ain't falling, the shots ain't falling. Why don't we call timeout? And let me make some adjustments to how we need to play based on the condition of the game." But go ahead, brother.
But that is the perfect piece, Mike Jones. So what one of the phenomena that occur in perseveration, this is the perfect metaphor. It's a phenomenon called stuck and set, where a person cannot switch from task or topic. And so it's not going well. We got to change. We got to look at the tape. Right? And so, and even when we try to look back, we don't even do so from a point of critical analysis. It's simply repetitive. In which case, if there's a problem, so what we saw in terms of this DEI madness, we're gonna boycott. So you're gonna boycott Target and go to Costco, which got worse stats in terms of hiring and promoting Black folks than Target, right? Because we don't do the critical analysis, right? But that's a part of what happens with perseveration, is that you get stuck in that point of repetition because you literally can't switch. So there's another piece to add cognitively. It's called inhibition. Inhibition is your ability to hold constant the overlearned or previous learned in the interest of new information. And so you can't move on with the new information if you can't inhibit or hold constant the old information. And that's a part of this dynamic. And so in our case, we didn't just happen to get there. We haven't chosen to be there. This too is a result of the constant downward pressure, and we start to internalize things that are, against our emotional and mental and physical well-being. And so, literally, we have to look at like we even say these things, but we don't think about the actual implications. So, so folks got excited to say, yeah, racism, that's an issue of public health. Okay, well then if it's an issue of public health, let's look at the ways that it impacts our health. And so the internalization of all of this stuff, it kind of creates a form of brain dysfunction, and that's part of what we have. We struggle with making strategic decisions. So Larry, you mentioned the interest conversions, and we got perfect stuff with this. So Black folks look back on Lincoln, we be like, oh, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, yeah, he did this little emancipation thing that didn't really emancipate nobody, but he did that for him, right? Now, how do we know?
He said it.
He said it. Yes, Mike Jones, he
And he
said
sent
it.
and he sent as many of us away as he could.
And not only did he say that, he said, Black folks and white folks can't live together. If they did, somebody was going to have to be superior, and I think it's us. And as a result, he sent about 400 of us over to some little island off the coast of Haiti, to literally perish because he was trying to figure out if he could get rid of us. So we ain't going to have slavery, but them jokers can't stay here, right? So he told us and he showed us. But who else told us? Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said, he ain't our guy, he their guy, definitively. But we don't do well with that, right? And so every time white people do something that has been in their political interest, we then think what comes along with that is kumbaya. Let's all join hands together and we're going to be. And that's not how this thing works. And that's how we keep ending up worse off than literally than how we started. And because we get any relative kind of freedoms to move about, we so we have some social gains, but we don't have any, political gains.
Charles, I want to ask you a question, but and this draws on your professional background. But so I need to frame it for a minute. I wrote a piece a long time ago about Django, about how Black folks respond to things. And I said there's basically, I'm not a psychologist, so, fortunately it was just a column, so I ain't got to explain it to it. But if you took Jung's, or Jung, how you say it? Jung's archetypes.
It's Jung.
No, right.
Mm-hmm.
I say there's two primary archetypes in the Black community, and that is Django, which represents resistance, okay, and then Stevens, who survived by accommodation, and it's not servitude, it's rationalizing that I need to support this order, and the order got me in the second position, and I'm okay with that, and that's how I make it through here. And I want you to go explain that a little bit, but specifically what you just said about that becomes subconscious over generations. That's not somebody saying, I got two options. I can be Django or I can be Steven. I think I'll be Steven. No, your circumstances and the behavior of the environment, your imminent environment of employment, you subconsciously become one or the other, and both of them may work in some set of circumstances or some environment, but to your earlier point, as the circumstances change, you're still caught up in the subconscious archetype that you not emulate, and that's how you respond to things. And if you can throw a little phenomenon in there for us about the psychological, that oppression is not just a physical thing, it's also psychological, and you need to figure out, you need to understand that, and you almost have to treat it, but somebody's got to be talking about it and explaining it. So could you go down that road a little bit for those of us who don't have your background and make it plain?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, so again, so essentially, perseveration is it means to ruminate. It means to just think over and over and over and over and over the same thought. So again, using the Orlando Magic and the Boston Celtics is doing the same thing. Or let's use the oft misquoted Einstein. You know, Einstein says um, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get the expecting to get a different response. And so it looks like that, you know, although that's not insanity. His description of it is kind of what perseveration is. It's like doing the same thing over and over again. Um, and expecting to get a different answer. And so for us, again, this ain't just a choice. This is conditioning. This is
That's
classical
the point
conditioning.
that I want you to
Yes.
focus on, right?
Yes. And so this is the result of 400 plus years of constant downward pressure, constant negative imagery, constant negative thoughts and treatment. We start to internalize this stuff, and we start to believe it. We in addition, or what kind of forces the internalization and the subsequent belief is our fear signaling. That is the so like we really have to think about lynchings generally and the assassinations of Medgar Martin, or Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin as political, as social political
Statement.
mechanisms of torture and behavioral control, because that's what they were. And so because of this, we come up, we end up in the phenomenon that I referred to before, this stuck and set, and it's difficult it becomes difficult, almost impossible for us to shift and make strategic change based on what's happening right now because of the overlearned response.
George, can I ask you a follow-up? Then the passivity
let me go here because I want to get Jerry L in. Please hold
Okay.
it, Mike. Mike, write that one down.
Okay.
But this is I mean, speaking of Fanon, it looks like the lumpen pro-literate class is really out in front running things for us as another problem. You know, the lumpen pro-literate class at one point were individuals that were the soldiers. Because you know, outside of that beautiful question and analysis that you gave, our leadership often looks like cosplay. And I'll give you an example that you touched on earlier, Doc. The whole Target boycott. Now, you know, from one's naked eye, you would assume that that was like the Montgomery boycott, but it had no substance to it whatsoever. That's cosplay. Why is it cosplay? Because we have lumpen pro-literate individuals that think that they are substantive enough to run uh, out front in these things that have no clue. You called it yeah, persever. Pronounce that one more time, Doc.
Perseveration.
Perseveration. But some of some of the leadership we have, and and cover your children's ears, looks like masturbation because they're doing a lot of work and producing absolutely nothing. Jerry L. Kwame Christmas, I would love to hear your opinions on these things, and the audience needs to hear it because you, in fact, worked in the Senate.
Exactly. I think that one, let me say this. Mike Jones, you are a definite jewel to us because we just don't have that level of thinking right now with the level of history and experience that you have. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we are suffering from in our community. You know, I love the parents I had. I know you opened up, Larry, talking about your mother, and we wish her a heavenly happy birthday. And, you know, I wish I could have my mother here just for 10 minutes, you know, just 10 minutes. But I appreciate everything that my parents dropped in me. You know, I used to get frustrated when my father would come home after drinking and make me listen to Malcolm X. But now I really appreciate that because what we learned over the course of history now is that hate does not stop. What it does, it just goes underground from time to time, but it never stops and it's always targeted towards us. And the problem that we're having, as Mike indicated when we led the show, is that we having this inability to be able to focus on us because that's all we have to do is focus on us. Like you said, there are other strategies. Just because of this ruling came down doesn't mean we can't vote. Most of the time, we don't lose elections because we can't vote. It's because we don't come out and vote in large numbers. We are in many areas and many jurisdictions where we have enough membership to make a difference, but we're not making a difference because we're not showing up. But that's also because our leadership, as Dr. Alexander said, our leadership is leadership by accommodation. We don't have black leadership now that's ready to challenge and stand up. Everybody wants to accommodate from our organizations to our leadership. You know, I know how Mike said it must be confusing for Barack Obama. We are Barack Obama. We living in a confusing state because we act as if we had a white mother. You know what I'm saying? We want to be accommodating and we want to be a part of the white society as much as Obama wants to be. That's the whole problem with us right now. That's why we can't get focused because we 2 or 3 generations in the sending our kids to be educated by white folks. Now, how possibly can we get this information to them if they've been educated by the enemy? When will you ever see hyenas and lions together? It just does not happen. And we refuse to take into account that they are going to be our enemies. Now, you may find one or two that you can deal with, but overall, they are always going to be an enemy to us, have always been the entire 250 years that we have been here. It has always been a struggle, and it's going to always be a struggle. And oftentimes, they have to rear up and do the things that the Supreme Court just did to make Black people understand that. I don't know why they would think that the Supreme Court is a fair court. You know, it's all about politics and who you can get placed on that court to do the things that you need to be done. And when we've had the opportunity, we have not been strategic enough, especially in the Democratic Party, for people to move off of the bench so that this bench shouldn't even have the majority that it has right now. If, let's say, if Barack had a Black mama. But then again, if Barack had a Black mama, he would have never gotten elected. It was having a white mama that allowed him to be elected because of the accommodation that people felt comfortable with. And integration has had a severe impact on us. As Mike says all the time, growing up, every institution, everything you went to prepared you on how to deal with white people. That is not happening and has not happened in several generations now. And that's the problem that we're having, not to mention when you think about locally here, ever since 314 Day, March the 14th, we have been having mass shootings going on in our city involving our young people, kids 13 to 15 years old involved in shootings and dying week after week after week. And nobody's even saying a word about it. And that goes to this whole idea of leadership by accommodation. We're not even challenging ourselves. We don't even have a code of conduct right now in our community, let alone talk about voting. So we have some serious issues that we have to address. As Dr. Alexander said, we're not even paying attention to the pattern recognition because it's right there in front of us, but we're not addressing it. And ultimately, it's on us to make this difference now because we right in this sweet spot. And when I say us, I'm talking about people in our age group. We right in this sweet spot where we've experienced enough to know better. We've had elders in our life, grandparents and parents, who have told us better. And we are just not stepping up to the plate. And we have got to step up to the plate and we have got to push these issues because if we don't push them, they're not going to get pushed. We do have some younger people who are now, because of these new decisions that are being made and the way that Trump and other administrative officials have been addressing direct attacks towards us are starting to wake up, but they still need guidance and they still need someone to help bring them together and organize them on the right path for what's going to be in the best interest of the Black population, not what's just going to be in the best interest overall. We have to look at what's in our best interest. You know, what is going to be in the best decision for us. And we have to look at everybody, what I would say, you know, from a Janet Jackson perspective, what have you done for me lately? We can't be loyal to anyone. I think, as you indicated, we have to figure out in these districts how we go in there and we vote for the Republican if necessary. We have to be more strategic. We are not strategic enough. Our leadership is not strategic, and we have to start demanding that from our leadership and figuring out how we organize around these abilities to do this and get past our inability and our unwillingness to recognize what's right here in the face of us now.
Mike, thank you, Kwame. Very well said as always. Mike, I want to go right back to you with that thought you had.
Yeah, well, the first thing, Gerald really summed it particularly all up politically. And my only point that I was going to make when he was talking is there's a, for me, there's a first law of politics, and it's true all the time, everywhere. You can have what you can take, you can keep what you can hold.
What you can
Period.
hold, period.
Period. It's yours as long as you can keep it. And somebody's always coming for your shit because you should be always coming for somebody else's shit. Because it ain't but so much. It's a fixed amount of power, resources, whatever. And
But
politics is
Mike, let me ask you this. How
yeah.
did we move away from that thinking? How did we get so far away from this whole concept especially when you think about here locally and you think about when you were involved with politics with Clay when they were organizing, having the interruption at Jefferson Bank. There's no they don't even caucus right now, and we allow them to get away with it. We had Sigma Day on the Hill, and we were at the Capitol, and Representative Bosley got up and addressed us and said, one of the biggest problems that they have right now is that, black people are not voting. And we need to make sure that black people are voting. Black people are not voting. And when she finished, I said, Representative Bosley, you all going to have to give us something to vote about because you're not addressing any real issues to make people want to vote. As a matter of fact, you all don't even caucus. Y'all don't even talk to each other to figure out how to address our problems. All of you are up here in your own silos, not talking to each other, not meeting, and then you want to blame us for not voting. We ain't voting because you ain't giving us a reason to vote.
I think Gerald, the short long answer to that is the American political culture has changed for I'm gonna say uh, starting in the 1900s. It could have been earlier than that, but fundamentally, let's just take 20th century. And when I started doing this, politics as a structure really looked like organized crime. Okay,
It was organized.
well, you could say I've often said that politics is the game without, and then you leave the gun at home.
Right, it's the legal game. It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
legal game. It's the same thing.
but it functions like that. And to be good at it or survive at it, you got to think like a hustler, like a gangster, but it was organized like that too. So it was organized around.
And on that point, Mike, you brought up early that we were getting things changed when we were messing things up because King was breaking the law.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But just on the political side, everything was about coalitions. Like if you took organized crime during prohibition, I got the trucks, you got the steels, Charles and Larry they the distribute because they own the speakeasies and stuff like that. And while we might have all had issues with each other, well, we all made money as criminals, and we figured out how to cooperate when there was a conversion of interest. And at that point, the cooperation made more sense than the fighting. So we didn't quit. They didn't quit fighting because they started liking each other. They made more money cooperating. So if you took that political structure, you had to put together these geographic coalitions, whether they were in a city, whether they were states in the region, to figure out how to win an election. And in that regard, segregation even served us because these black communities were congregated in politically geographic positions where you could negotiate from that position. If you want us to help you win, what do we get? Because the famous Al Cervantes quote is something I've always loved. When somebody had a great idea or something like that, he said, that's a great idea, but where am I in all of this? So all of it was a quid pro quo arrangement. And inside of that, that's where black judges came from. Okay, you didn't need no court system. A judge is a lawyer who knows a politician. Okay, so that and matter of fact, I would suggest that black politicians did a lot better job at selecting the right black lawyers to be judges than the system does. 'Cause that's the other thing.
Exactly. I think we should be electing the judges now. I'm totally against
But the
the
judges
nonpartisan court plan.
But the judges wasn't elected. The
Mhm.
people who chose the judges were elected. But how you stayed in politics was you had to take, now again, it's the gangster stuff. You had to take care of the geography from which you came. If you couldn't deliver nothing, whatever it was that community meant, you couldn't stay there. So all that was happening is these conversions of coalitions kept building up, and black politicians were part of that equation. And as their political skill and muscle developed, they got more and more. And so, what changed all of that was, and I don't mean this, I'm being descriptive now and not editorial. Jesse running for president and as a serious candidate, okay? I mean, literally out there. And then also Nixon, what he did during Watergate and the reforms everybody made placed the emphasis on not party organization, but more open system and more, quote, democratic systems where the people could participate. Well, the people don't do politics every day. So you diminish the role. It'd be like everybody going into court to represent themselves. When they used to have a lawyer who knew the system, who could represent you, now you represent yourself, and you wonder why you're always losing or you shit don't win. Because one, you don't know what you're doing. You just showed up, and when it was time to vote. But all of these packages, I can tell you about how the first black citywide elected officials happened in a place like St. Louis was all part of deals to get white politicians elected. Because the white politicians couldn't get elected without the black support. The black support said, well, John Bass got to be the first black comptroller as a function of a deal to make John Pelker the next mayor of the city of St. Louis, period. It was done in the back room, okay? And now everybody and their mother shows up and say, I'm running for this and I'm running for that. And you had enough discipline and order in a community that you could put yourself out there if you wanted to, but wasn't nobody gonna pay you no attention. And the community was looking at black political leadership to give them some direction. And the reason they followed that direction is because that decision transferred into some benefit. And now we disconnected the decision from the benefit, and all you get is political ambition. And that's where my term entrepreneurial politician comes from.
And we heavily inundated in our community.
But that's the whole political culture throughout the country. The culture that I'm describing, that was the way American politics worked. Okay, I just told you about the black component of it, but that was everybody's politics. Okay, and so again, I'll use an organized crime metaphor. Inside of that system, everybody was keeping the game going. So once you got in it and was a player, you could be Bumpy Johnson. I mean, the Sicilians ran New York, but they didn't run Harlem. Okay, and he ran Harlem, and because he ran Harlem, and you couldn't do stuff without him, then he's at the table. Now he ain't at the Sicilian table. he's sitting at on the black side, but there's stuff that they can't do without him. And every time they come to him, he gets a chance to go to them. And then at some point, you all have a revolving credit relationship in politics. We ain't doing deals one at a time. We got a relationship. So I got credit with you, you got credit for me. We accommodate each other. So, oh, you need that? Cool, no problem. We'll take care of that. Because now I can come to you with my same issue. You say, yeah, I can handle that for you. So those were the organic give and take of how you do this work. And that translated into benefit both narrow and large. So and that's why white folks are complaining about the system not working, because the system don't work. Okay, that's how ordinary people benefited from politics, because that's why Tip O'Neill could say all politics was local, because you didn't get a chance to wake up one morning and say, I want to be president of the United States, just like you couldn't wake up one morning and say, I want to be Don Corleone. Well, you better start out robbing trucks and dresses and start off with the olive oil company and the numbers and work and survive your way up the chain. And then one day you might be the Godfather. But that job ain't put in the paper. Those are positions that are earned over time and as a function of circumstance. So you have this collapse of the system, and I'll just talk about money in politics. There's always been money in politics, but money didn't run politics. So here's what professional politicians.
Thank you, Citizens United.
Huh?
Thanks,
Yeah.
Citizens United.
You all know who Willie Brown is, right?
Absolutely, Speaker of the
Right.
House.
Right, but there was
Former
a white guy in California named Jesse Unruh, and he was Willie Brown. That's where Willie Brown learned how to be Willie Brown. Okay, and he was the Speaker of the California House, General Assembly, and he was at one point in time the chairman of the State Democratic Party. So, you know, like Richard Daley was the mayor of Chicago and chairman of the politics and the government went together. Okay, it's kind of a Mao Zedong kind of thing. And Jesse, when somebody asked Jesse Unruh about money in politics, he said, well, let me tell you something. He said, you ain't a legislator until you can take their money, not drink their whiskey, screw their women, take their money, and then vote against their bill. Okay? So the money would get you an audience. It wouldn't buy you shit else. Of course you brought the money. Okay? Because you couldn't sit here to talk to me without bringing the money. Now the question is whether I'm going to do this or not ain't about the money. Okay, it's about interest conversion. Does it make sense from our point of view? Okay, and you say, I'll pay you. You know, you can't pay me for this. My power ain't for sale. My influence is not for sale. It's what I trade on. You can't buy this. I'm Avon. I had to take these corners from somebody. You can't buy a corner from me. Okay? So what you want? And if it makes some sense, then we'll do it. If it don't make no sense, we ain't gonna do it. Simple as that. And here's the other thing. You go take the note. One of the first things that Leroy Tiles told me this when I first started. The guy they elected, he said the most important thing and the most powerful word in a politician's vocabulary is no. If you don't know, if you can't or don't know how to say no, you ain't gonna be in business long. And here's why.
No is a complete sentence.
You're right. And here's why you accept the no. Because if you don't, and you want to make an issue out of it, something bad can happen. Or the way we used to put it, if you shoot my dog, I'm gonna kill your cat. Okay, and the And the point is, I can't stop you from doing anything to my dog, but if you love your cat, you won't do that. Because I can't do nothing about the dog, but I promise you the cat is dead. And you can count on that.
So,
So, yeah.
Dr. Alexander, what solutions jump out? What should we be
Oh,
doing?
can,
And
can I ask, can I
Michael,
ask Charles a question? Here's a question that I wanted for you. America, unlike Western Europe, is a very religious country, okay, and usually religious country for an industrial society. And black folks are very religious people, but the way we practice Christianity is extraordinarily passive. You know, my frame of reference is we're waiting on Jesus when we should be looking for Moses. And so how does that passivity in the practice of it, since we put so much emphasis in that in our cultural formation, how big an impact does the passivity play into these psychological uh, frames that you've been giving us this morning?
Huge. That's the answer.
Okay. Why don't
Huge.
you explain it?
So,
Why don't you explain it to the folks? Okay.
so, uh, so one of the things that we get, and from your earlier question, you said like, how do we get some Fanon into this, right? So Fanon said he predicted we was gonna get what we get, right? He's like, so that class of leaders, that are fighting, that are allegedly fighting for us at the point of the victory, they only start doing what the oppressor was doing, right? And so they got to go too, right? So that's essentially what Fanon has said, and that's where we are now. Now, part of that is also, a part of this perseveration, and that is, so we get from the more active things into more, and Gerald, you introduced the term, this accommodationist stuff. We get to that, um that too is a survival mechanism. Now it has not proven to work, i.e., we keep doing it, perseveration. But that's how we get to that space, and that's and in that part that Fanon was predicting, that's what made that so, is that the enemy's ideology. First of all, we think like the enemy because we talk like the enemy. So in Francis and Fanon's case, the issue was French language. In our case, the issue is English. We think like white folks because we speak English. That that has a direct impact on our consciousness. We have to intentionally do things differently because otherwise we are hardwired to do as they do. Because we learn we learn to do what they do, because that's the nature of this place. Um, and so, but that more passive uh piece, it
all right,
becomes,
Doc, I hear you channeling E. Franklin Frazier a little bit in there too.
I'm going there too. And so that's how we get the black bourgeois, the black bourgeoisie. And so I'm gonna jump forward just for a second and come back. So how we get out of this thing, to your question, Larry, is um well, it's both. So Mike, your question is, so how do we get out of things? So we got to get out of this rumination piece, because we got to get, in order to get out of this rumination piece, we got to get back to active problem solving, back to active engagement, back to active protest. Now, part of how we do that is um is engaging. Again, we got to engage the ancestors. We got to actually understand the processes. So, Mike, you're using, using the church and the passivity, like the way that we practice Christianity. So if we look at the way that people even talk about Dr. King, oh, he took that more passive. Dr. King was up against the the United States government was infinitely more powerful than the contemporary Roman. Like Rome wasn't disappearing people the way that the United States government disappeared people. Even once you account for the difference in time, United States government, while Dr. King is fighting the United States government, is overthrowing countries. And so Dr. King was speaking truth to power every day, but we mischaracterize that thing and we don't understand that thing. So we can't benefit from that thing.
And Sean, I want to throw this in. Me having been there during that time, and also been that if you were in by the late 60s, we had romanticized revolutions, okay, in America, Black America. I mean, if you my age at that time, yeah, we gonna have a revolution. And Malcolm even told us, and the last poets had a poem in one of their albums. Niggas are scared of revolution. And Malcolm used to say, if you really knew what a revolution was, you'd run and hide, because that really is not no joke. So to your point, that Dr. King took that was the only weapon he had available to him. So it didn't matter whether he created a theological justification for it, but he really didn't have another option. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, and you can find lectures in which he says that. It's like it's just not plausible to do anything other than how we're doing, right? So like even my brother from Carolina that wrote Negroes with Guns or whatever. He went to Cuba.
Right.
You ain't we are outmanned and outgunned. All that false bravado ain't got no space
Right.
for the revolution, right? And so that's also seeing people not understanding Gil Scott. People, this time the revolution won't be televised. At the end of the song, he says it's in your mind. People don't even listen to the song. So you got to literally change how you're going about this thing. But that's part of how we fight this. But again, back to your question, Mike. So then again, as a response to that constant pressure and the physical overt violence, so this is where we get back to that point. Like, I mean, how many more people we gotta see assassinated, right? And so when we just, so you see. So let's think about it in terms of classical conditioning, right? So we're gonna pair a neutral stimulus with a conditioned response, all right? So if I say vote, if I tell you to vote, murder. How many times I gotta see that before I start to get a little ambivalent about voting? So if I see mega kill because of voting, we can argue that they came from Malcolm within a year of the time of the Battle of the Bullet.
Right.
So Malcolm's talking about voting, killed. Dr. King, killed. All them other folks killed, disappeared, lynched, all that relative to voting rights. Really, any kind of assertion of independence and freedom, killed. So at a point, folks shift in what they perceive to be in our best interest to what's called the suppressed emotion. So, or respectability politics, where we want to clean up and quiet down because we don't want to get killed.
Charles, address that a little further. In my entry point on that is literally what you just said, so people should understand that the Stephen response is rational in certain situations.
In
That
a
it,
context.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a certain context, that's what you said at the beginning of that of answering that question. It's a survival mechanism
It,
that
it
works.
it's all survival. Uncle Tom is rational in
Right.
a certain context.
That's right.
I'm sorry. Go
But
ahead.
right.
I'm enjoying this interplay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so, but that becomes the piece. Like we have to go back. So again, so an answer also requires critical consciousness. Um, and that one of the people that wrote about that is this brother named Roderick. I think his last name is what? Roger Watts, who incidentally was married to the sister that wrote Caste. And but I could see a scenario where ultimately their politics caused them to part ways. But I digress. The critical consciousness is necessary because again, we got to look at how we got to these places. Um, so for example, all right, so we go back and forth about segregation. Even in segregation, there was an other side of the tracks. There was a middle class, bourgeois black community that did not talk to the rest of the people unless they absolutely had to. They taught them because they couldn't teach nobody else. They teach them because they loved them. They taught them because they couldn't work nowhere else. Why do we know? It's because they left. Now, do we say, so we say all of this is a function of Brown and blah, 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 blah. So let's just look at the numbers. In 1940, 7% of black people graduated from high school. So where is all of this black education occurring that we keep talking about? In 1950, that number jumped to 13%. In 1960, that number was maybe 20%. We were not graduating from high school, so we weren't doing all good during that period of time. Now we graduate at like an 88 to 90% clip. Is it great? No. Is it better than it was? Definitively. That's just the facts. And so we got to look back on the period and break it down, see what worked, what didn't work, why it didn't work, and go forward. Is interest conversions absolutely bad? Not if that's the only thing we got. We got to be able to use it to our advantage. Interest conversion don't mean that they accept us. That means that there is something that they gain by including us on whatever they include us on.
Uh,
So,
Charles,
mhm.
basically, it's like you see in the movies when the guy walked in and said, "You got the dope," and the other guy said that you bring the money. That's interest conversion.
That's interest conversion, and that's about as good as it gets,
Yeah, right,
right? They don't like each other.
right.
they, they do business.
That's
It's
right. Do business.
transactional.
Right.
It's transactional, and sometimes that's as good as it gets. We, again, because we've been othered for 500, 400 years, we are over, we're very, very sensitive to exclusion and very, very sensitive to inclusion. So, for many of us, just that there's any inclusion, it means like. They like us, but they don't like us because they hyenas and we lions. And so we can't like each other. Now, we could figure out how to kind of share this territory. Like, I'm going to deal with this side of the water hole and you deal with that side of the water hole. And as long as you don't come over here on this side of the water hole, we cool. But as soon as you cross that line, it's going to be one. What usually happens is we cross that line, it be one, and then we be asking when they start killing black folks. Hell, when they stop. And so this is what it looks like. This is the long-term implication from us, from a social, emotional, mental, and behavioral piece of this internalized stuff. But it in order for us to get back into the you know, greater engagement, greater informed and active engagement, we got to go back and actually, look at how we got here and like parse it out and see what strategies worked and why they worked when they worked. And and again, the other thing that we have is like we keep looking at these things as new phenomena. This has been what our fight has been since we start fighting. It's always been a group of folks who were vulnerable to compromise. There's always been um, a more radical group, so to speak, and there's always been a group in the middle. Hell, just the fact that there was 70 years of colored Negro or black conventions, whatever we call them, that in and of itself, regardless of what a guy's position was in the course of it, was revolutionary activism, right? But we gotta be able to look at these things in that way. At that time, it was a decision amongst those brothers at one of the conventions, like we gonna stop using African, we gonna go with colored. That's something that they actually debated, right? And that at that time, do we need to stay here or do we need to go? All right, y'all check out and see what's going on in South America. Is South America option? You go to Canada, you see if Canada is an option, and you go to Africa. They were doing all of this during at the same time while folks were enslaved, and there was a whole group of them, and other folks other than than just Frederick Douglass, but Frederick Douglass certainly is saying we can't go. If we go, it's even worse for our brothers and sisters in bondage. So some of y'all can go, but we can't all go because it's not in that interest. And so, but we got to go back and we got to look at all these things. Like right now, it's fashionable to say, it's more people in prison now than it was slaves. It's a dumb comparison. Dumb comparison. In 1860, it was 4 million slaves. It was 400,000 free black folks.
Right. That's the number. That's the number.
So to make that comparison is goofy. So it's 46, 49 million black folks right now. Somewhere between 2 to 4 million of us are incarcerated. I'll take that. I don't want that, but I'll take that. That's progress. But if we don't look at these things in context, we get stuck in those places. Yes, sir.
So how do we in a country where the culture that you're curated in, whether you're black or white, values illiteracy, and we're historically illiterate. Everybody in America is. I mean, if you're talking to an American of any persuasion, you're talking to the most illiterate person in the advanced industrial world. Okay, I guarantee you that I'll take a bet that America finishes. The smartest American might be as smart as the smartest person anywhere, but the average American is literally probably the most ignorant person in the advanced world.
We are the Arkansas of the advanced world.
Yeah. Okay. And we are part of that. Okay. We're not so our historical literacy takes a different thing, but there's nothing, it's not like the culture produces or curates intelligence and critical thinking. It doesn't. And we're curated in that same macro culture with a micro expression that has a black flavor or black tinge to it. So how do you do that? I mean, because literally all of this pushback from MAGA America is a function of an intellectual paradigm shift that has happened over the last 50 years, and that's why they're going back. And I'm going to say, want to undo the Enlightenment and get back to the the Middle Ages, where you could have church and there's an order, there's a social order and hierarchy, and you rationalize it as some religious based guide, inspired structure that everybody now fits in the space. So one of the things that all of this is done, people keep the focus on Trump stealing, and that's what he's doing, and that's why they want it. But they're ultimately trying to figure out how do you recapture the American narrative to reinforce what they've already had. I'm going to suggest I don't think they got the numbers to do it, so I don't think you can pull it off. But I don't know what AI would do. But how do we take where we are now and move a critical mass of us to a different space? Because I would suggest in the late 60s going into the early 70s, if you're in my age cohort, the notion of redefining America to us and America and who we were to America and America in the world was, to quote Mao Zedong, you had a dialogue that was let 100 flowers bloom at 100 schools of thought content. Wasn't so much that we had a theory, but that was an active intellectual engagement. So brothers and sisters were arguing about that all of the time. So we were totally in a different space, and over the time that petered out. I mean, there wasn't a thing so much as it was a flash in the pan moment that captured a certain age cohort, and they might have carried that through, but then we reverted back to the intellectual passivity that's consistent with the country. So did not happen to us, but we just like everybody else did here. So what do you do with that?
And it's literally what we it you got to take the level set and multiply it times a million. This is literally what's got to happen. And so externalizing the problem. So this is not so yeah, we got a bunch of individuals acting in a way that is not, is not in our best interest. A bunch of Black folks acting in a way that's not in our interest. But they didn't just individually decide to do this. This is a result of the systemic forces against us. Public enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. This is that nation of millions acting on us all the time. Now, the other thing that we don't think about in this whole piece, and this is part of, our fantasy of being expats, this is like this everywhere. And what we don't do is think about the fact that all those European nations at some point in time had some part to play in the transatlantic slave trade. And so, because we do that. And so that same way that Frederick Douglass talked about, Negroes sitting around, in the little spare time they had, like at holiday when masters would visit masters, and then the coachman would sit off in the bush and argue about who master had the best or whose master was the nicest. We do that with these nations. And these nations all had a part to play in us being here. And that too, because we can't go back and look at these things, we don't have the we don't have the historical context, and so we have to have that historical piece, Mike, and because that ultimately is what will help us to see this as the systemic thing that it is. That this isn't, because that's the other part that we think this just that toothless white boy that don't like me. He don't want me to have this. This ain't just him. This is them. This is what it looks like. When you say hyenas and lions, they hyenas. This is what it looks like. This is what they
Dr.
do.
Alexander, I think the difficulty becomes finding the places where we can educate ourselves on those issues that you're talking about. Because we just don't seem to have, structures in place right now to do that. I know
But you just
previously.
went to you just had blue on the hill, Sigma's on the hill. Yeah, you keep doing that. That's what it
Oh
looks
yeah, we
like.
could do it in those places, but I think one of the things that's difficult, like in schools and churches, they don't do that anymore. Especially in churches, they don't. And then
We need more churches, yes.
in schools, if you try to say, for example, my wife is at an all black elementary school, but they can't come in there and talk to those black kids about being black. If you start talking to them about being black, you'll get terminated, because it ain't
But it always
allowed.
been like that.
But has it always, but when
Yes,
we were
that's why
segregated with,
Carter
Yeah.
G. Woodson was hustling his work. Negroes wasn't just like,
Here,
hey, Dr. Woodson, can you come? No, they wasn't doing that because they
here,
still worked for the white school board.
well, and to that point, the transmission, the intergenerational transmission about who we are in America wasn't structured as much as it was organic. And so
It
it's
was
some,
guerrilla, like you said
yeah,
earlier.
right. And so what you have is, and I'll just take boys, young men, old brothers. There we had, because of the proximity, there were all these intergenerational relationships. I mean, that, and depending on what you were trying to do, you would know men who were 15 years, 25 years older than you, where you're not their equal, but you are their peer, and y'all share this space. And old brothers do what veterans do with rookies. Let me sit down and tell you about how this game goes, son. Okay, now to Charles's metaphor, you got to multiply that by millions. Okay, but at that point in time, it was multiplied by millions. Now every the transmission didn't get to everybody. Everybody didn't get it the same way, but it was so pervasive that you always had a critical mass of black folks who understood what white folks and white America was about. And you would have here was a black idiomatic concept that you would have heard if you're my age growing up. Well, those are the good white folks, and them ain't the good white folks. Okay,
right,
now, so
right,
we he said, and so what they're telling you is all white folks ain't bad. But don't confuse that because there's some good white folks. And we are kind of okay because there's been enough good white folks that through a block for you have made something happen. But don't confuse them, that with them. And so your personal white friend who could be legitimately your friend. Okay.
right.
Yeah. Y'all got, because that's why you refer to him as your white
Versus
friend.
group think.
Versus, but you can't take that, you can't infer from that relationship a
Good way.
general statement
From
about white America.
you
And,
cannot.
Or that
and
your white friend that you friends with is gonna be friends with your whole community.
well, no, if he really your white friend, y'all understand that we in this space that's just us. And
Right.
it don't apply to nothing else. Because
Nothing else.
maybe we both like jazz or basketball or whatever, but we got a thing. Maybe we like politics.
Mm.
I got white friends from being a politician. I mean, legitimate white friends. But we don't talk about white folks in America. We talk about a lot of shit, but we leave that alone because
Right.
fundamentally, he got to go back to his tribe. I'm going back to my tribe. I'll see you next time we down at the watering hole, sort of thing.
But see,
You
Mike,
don't.
but see, Mike, what you never ever lost sight of, either consciously or unconsciously, was the fact that there was a level of competition with these individuals, no matter what, and that this empire was wicked. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna show you how you applied it. You often tell us a story about how guys would be in your father's barbershop, and you say, well, and leave, and you say, well, where you going? It's like, man, I'm about to go downtown a lot of these white folks. And as Fanon stated, you are under no obligation to ever tell the truth to an individual that has demonstrated that they're opposite of you. And that implication that you had is one that was just as much a survival skill as Stevens.
Right.
Now, you ultimately got to get rid of Stephen, but
Right.
You do.
you should understand why he is who he is.
And that's my point.
Yes.
Charles, that's my point. That Stephen didn't choose to be Stephen. Stephen is a product of a long-term oppression, and that happened to be his survival response to that. Now, once he is that, he owns it, and he ain't trying to be un-Stephen, because now that's who he is. But when you're young, you're real judgmental and editorial about it. If you ain't Stephen, because you think everybody chose.
And it becomes victim blaming.
Right. That's exactly what it does. It becomes right.
But we do have a significant amount of Stevens
we've
in our
always had
community.
them, though.
We've
We've always
been
had
here.
them. I don't doubt that we've always had
And
them.
we've had more Stevens than we had Django. Trust me.
Right. I agree with that. But we at a low level of Django's, and we at a high level of Stevens right now.
That is the nature of it.
That's the
And
nature
that
of it.
is, mhm. But it's in the way that we're moving right now and the abilities that we have. It is, we got to kill some of these Stevens.
And so we got to replace
Like you
that
said it,
stuff.
we have
gotta
got,
replace
because we
that
just
stuff.
got too many of them. We have
Right.
too many of them
So
in too many
back
places.
back to your point, then we gotta have, we're not gonna have this thing change in mass overnight. We gotta have
Right.
all of these things done where they can be done. So, like you were mentioning,
So
churches. So we
with
gotta
that,
find the church that
Doc,
it can occur in. We gotta
Doc,
find the school
Doc,
that it can occur in.
Doc,
Mhm.
let's you've already started. I just want to focus everybody where you're going. Where you started with the solution, so everybody let's talk about the solution. Doc, go ahead.
So you gotta have that contextual resilience. You gotta those places where we can do this work. That's where we gotta do this work. So, like, one of the things again is like the problems with our ability to set shift. Now this I will say I think is secondary to our interpretation of the movement. We start spending too much time trying to be in spaces where they definitively don't want us. There's no need to be the first person at this particular white school or this particular white church or this particular white community. Ain't no upside to that other than you being that. And if you're moving into a community, you probably maintain your housing value for a little bit, but otherwise ain't no upside to that. All that does is
Right.
lead to isolation, disenfranchisement at a social level, and depression. Why do I know? Because that's what the stats say. Black folks move to these spaces, to these so-called exclusive areas, and raise their kids there. Their sons and daughters have mood disturbance more than kids who don't go.
And they don't even understand that. I was thinking, I had a friend that just moved back here, to St. Louis, and they getting ready to build a house in Wentzville. I mean, you all know the territory here. And I was thinking, why the hell would you be, moving to Wentzville to build that's so isolated. You know,
It's
that's on the
very, very,
other
and so,
side
and
of
so
St.
something
George.
comes, yeah,
You know, I
something
But
said,
comes
but
with
why
but
that.
why
but
would a Negro want to build a
wait a
house
minute.
in Wentzville?
But Gerald, I want you to pause for a moment and and I'm going to suggest you're assuming facts, not in evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And the assumption that you're making is about us as a community, and that point to Charles's earlier point, my on further reflection analysis is that quote the black community was never an organic composition from within. The black community was formed by overt white oppression. They
Mm-hmm.
took these disparate individuals and forced them into a place. And once they got there, they created community. I mean, our culture, our music, all the beautiful shit that we love about ourselves came from that space, but we didn't create that space. We're not like Greeks or Italians who say when I came over to America as an individual, I started looking for the folks like me.
Mm-hmm.
We all came over on the same boat, wasn't speaking the same language, which came from totally different places, didn't choose to come here. And now we find ourselves together like forever. So we start creating community. But as the oppression, uh, my view is as the oppression receded, not our status changed, but just the overt oppression receded, we started to be able to make individual choices that we historically couldn't make. And there was nothing that held us together. I mean, you're never going to see us like in University City coming from all over the place to walk to Temple on Saturday. And somebody said, "What's that?" That's all the black folks. No matter, they come, they live all over the place, but they come here. You can count on a critical mass being here. We inherited, so all of our ceremonial, cultural stuff, all the things that tied us together, was a function of we were all forced into the space. And then once we have options to leave the space, we lose what ties us together. I would suggest that since quote we're all black Greeks, I would suggest that everybody's been one a long time. The frat ain't what the frat was in terms at a macro level. Okay, that the whole experience is a totally different experience. Okay, and that's cause we in a totally different place now, and it means different things. So you know, I think that's the challenge. How do you create community when we don't have natural organic connections? Okay, that we can't trace our collective lineage back to the same source. We and if we do track it back to the same source, it stops at 1619, and we didn't choose the source. Okay, we got thrown into the pot, and we cooked something delicious out of it, but we didn't choose it. It chose us. As a matter of fact, I did a series on that, but when I got to this part, I said we didn't choose America. America chose us, and we didn't even choose us. Okay, that is the reality of the formation of the black community. We didn't choose to form a community. We created one as we got forced together. And as the and the oppression was the mortar that held our bricks together. And as the oppression, quote, receded, overt oppression receded, we start finding ways that we weren't connected, and we voluntarily or involuntarily separated because there was nothing that organically holds us together. And therein is a fundamental challenge that I just don't know. I guess time will correct it one way or the other, but I don't know if there's a strategy to deal with that. Is
This
it,
is the
Charles?
strategy. This the
Uh-huh.
strategy. I said this the strategy, but and again, like I we always have to look at this thing as a systemic piece. And so, whether we're talking about E. Franklin Frazier or whether we're talking about uh uh Carter G. Woodson, both of them are saying that, and one in the 20s and one in the 50s, they're both saying that this is a systemic issue. Now, neither of them, I don't think either of them actually use the word systemic, but that's what they're talking about. And they're talking about this pressure from the dominant culture is causing us to do things that are not in our best interest. And where this thing has definitively flipped, relative to that realization, is that both of them are talking about, E. Franklin Frazier is definitively using the term Black bourgeoisie. That's the title of his book. But they're both talking about the Black middle class. That's who they're talking about. Those people who've gone, like, even when we talk about that, what's that book, Larry, about the pink slip, blah blah blah.
Jim Crow's pink slip.
Yeah, even when we're talking about those folks, the number of those folks who were educated in the Big Ten and or what has become the Big Ten and other white institutions, all them people wasn't good for us. Some of them was good for us, but all of them people wasn't good for us. Some of them people are the people that caused Carter G. Woodson to write his book. Some of them people was the people that caused uh that caused E. Franklin Frazier to write his book. Some of them people are the same people that Malcolm called house niggas. Some of them people are the same people that what's my man that was at Ebony, I mean that was at uh
Lerone Bennett?
not LeBron, but him too. Yeah, some of them people the same people. But the brother that was at Dr. King's church, that was at the church in Montgomery before Dr. King got there. Um I just can't remember his name. But the bourgeois Negroes in that church didn't want him. They went and got Dr. King because they thought they was gonna be able to control him. Those were the bourgeois, the 4 or 5. So much the same way that we end up with a Target boycott. It was 4 or 5 Negro preachers in Montgomery who called the city and said the boycott is over. We fine. They didn't have nothing to do with it. Just like Jamal Bryant didn't have nothing to do with it. He decided that he was the man. Negroes start following him. So it was a set of pastors during the boycott that tried to do the same thing. These things have always happened. There's always been, somebody who's been willing to sell out the masses for, what they thought was a better notion. Now, some of those people who was willing to sell out the revolution, some of them people thought that was in the interest of the masses.
Right.
It was just a bad decision. But they thought that it would be safer for everybody if we didn't have these rabble rousers.
Now,
That is a fact.
Charles,
Yeah, that's true.
that would be an example of part of the Stephen archetype. That fundamentally, it ain't selling out, it's making a judgment about what is as you see it, our best way to survive. And I think one of the real challenges is how to understand that psychologically, organically, psychologically, while at the same time taking and making a political argument an exception to that. Because both of those things have to happen at the same time.
And we literally gotta continue to talk about these things.
Right.
And we literally gotta, you know, we literally got to use history. So let's take, for example, so in a survey of 33 African nations, 33 current African nation states, they found that like over 40% of the folks identify with, they prefer a national identity. And then, a smaller percentage, or so like 45 prefer the national identity, and then like 43, 41, something like that, prefer a blend between their national identity and their ethnic identity. And then a small group, something in the teens, of course, just if we just do the math, prefer their ethnic identity, right? And so that smaller
So you're
number is
saying
kind of,
tribal identity.
yeah. And so it oddly enough, it happens to be about 13%. And why I say that's oddly enough, because that's what we are here, about 13%. And so, but we come from all of that diversity that has become those statistics that I just said there, where we think that they got this thing figured out. They ain't got it figured out either, right? But what's to know is, particularly in those situations where folks take a national identity. So if you're in Nigeria and you prefer the national identity to your ethnic identity, then essentially you've chosen to identify yourself with a name that was given to you by some white British woman. Nigeria ain't no African word. That's some white woman gave them that name. that title, that name, that designation, Nigeria is a function of the colonial power, right? We look at them like they got this all figured out. They got the same colonized mind as we got, which is why we read Frantz Fanon. But we don't think about it like that because we don't engage history like that. And so when we deal with all of these fantasies, but there's some facts behind how we got here today. And we gotta account for that. What did Michael say? Somebody's gotta somebody's gotta
account
for that.
Somebody got to pay for
Right.
Santino.
Somebody gotta
Yeah,
pay for
somebody
that.
got you gotta pay. Right.
We gotta think it that way.
We
But
have
we
to.
don't.
We have to.
We have to go back through the thing and think it that way. That this is what's gotta happen. Like right now, if we look at the news, so like the same way that white politicians get on TV and lie, black politicians get on TV and lie too. So black politicians will get on TV and be like, the masses of black folks aren't really concerned about reparations. That's fundamentally false. 77% of black folks favor reparations. We are literally behind in terms of the national movement. I don't know that we're necessarily behind in terms of, international movement. I don't know that we're necessarily behind in our thoughts about reparations, but we are definitely behind in terms of, reparations as a national, the national implications. So what we do have is something other than reparations going on all over the place, because we get we get these small victories in cities and counties and stuff like that, but that's not reparations. That's something other than reparations. But it's good that it happens, but it ain't reparations. Reparations is a national thing. The United States government ultimately has to reconcile this situation, because it was they were the last folks to do this harm. Not because they created it, because the government didn't exist as such. But once they did exist, they perfected it. And so they're the ones that got to pay.
It's to that point, Charles, two things. First of all, when the country was formed in 1789 with this Constitution, they had they had the ability to do something different, and they chose to ratify the history and maintain it going forward. I think I'll go back to my point about our historical literacy. That fundamentally, my view is kind of, if you're on a continent, you're much more aware of the colonial nature of your history and how dominant that was. And a lot of that debate seems to be, internal debate seems to be how you feel about the Western hegemony. You know, that fundamentally, if you are an advocate of the decline of the West in terms of political dominance, then you become natural allies of the Chinese, India, stuff. Now all these people ain't necessarily got nothing in common except how they feel about Western dominance. People who cannot identify with the Western orientation have tendency to align themselves with America, parts of Western Europe, independent of the history of the relationship, because they're looking at the consummate order. I think one of the things that we don't do is we don't have that other discussion about, is our interest served with America being a dominant global power, or is our interest best served if America loses that power and influence? Now, and how white folks feel about American dominance and influence. And I would suggest that we don't ever talk about that. And our default position is we with the white folks. Okay, that was the point of the article. We with the white folks. Not because we thought about it and say it. I think
we've been pretty much. What's the matter? We sick, boss. That's pretty much what we do.
And so
that's the way we've been socialized.
Yes, that's the whole.
I mean,
we've been socialized to put. We've been socialized to put their needs first.
But
yes, that's secondary to being oppressed.
But and by definition, and also it is a function of we're a product of the dominant culture. Okay, because you can't escape it. Now you can have a different kind of response to it, but our response relative to the fundamentals of American culture are really on the margins. They're stylistic responses. White folks on 1 and 3, we on 2 and 4. I mean, if I had to define the difference, there is not a Black worldview that is different from the American worldview. Okay, and
that's the epitome of neocolonialism in your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's the internalization. So right. So that's the externalizing of the situation. And so, Gerald, your point, all of these points, that's what they mean, is that we've internalized this thing. And so
and that's why it's so important to have these conversations.
And so
because
this
without
is
these
the contextual fight. Right.
You don't realize how much you yourself have internalized.
And you're doing more than that. You're taking people to Africa, Gerald. I mean,
Hmm.
you're taking people to Africa.
which is the contextual response. And
You
so
Right.
you
yes.
find these spaces, the level set, the Sand Show, the brothers in LA, whoever is doing this work, they doing the work at the, everybody, literally everybody could do something in their measure. So the issue is, does
But
everybody want to
Dr.
do it?
But Dr.
And
Alexander,
so,
that's the thing. Can I ask you this?
mhm.
The question is one, right? Um, everybody doesn't want to do it. And then the people that are doing it from a psychological standpoint, you under constant attack. You know,
Yes.
when you take these positions, you are always the villain.
And that's
And
called
that can be, let me just ask you this one thing. That can be very hard on your mental status, because it's hard to always, every time you walk in the room, you got to be the villain.
Because
You're,
they've been gaslit so hard that they're
you're
gaslighting
right.
you. I'm
And
sorry.
I'm not talking about you, the villain, because you
Uh-uh.
walking in a room with white people. You the
That's what
villain.
I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm saying, you the villain in the frat meeting because you
Yeah.
bringing this.
right, right. And so again, that's that emotional
But how do you deal with
suppression.
that? How do you deal with that
It's this.
constant?
But see, you get to come here. So what about the brother or sister that don't even have this?
Mm,
So one of the things I kind of grew to think was kind of goofy, right? Over time, I just thought it was stupid to hear people say, "Well, what do you suppose Dr. King would be saying?" So like Dr. King would be 99 years old or something like that. What do you suppose that Dr. King? What I suppose is that he would have died by the time he was 50. Jackie Robinson was 53, right? Because that is the weight of this fight.
right.
The
Well,
reason, go ahead, Mike Jones.
now I was going to say, Gerald, to your point, and I'll just give you my the way I tried to react to all of this. You can't evangelize or or prostitutory kind of stuff. You can't convert people. You have to be more insidious than that. Matter of fact, the less you say about literally what you think, the better off you are. You got to approach it like a hustler. You read the room to say, how do I approach this to maximize what I'm trying to get done here? Now,
Mm,
in that process, you'll always, and I'm going to say this is an old to young thing, you'll run across one, two, three, whoever who notice something different and say, I want to talk to him. Okay, I've been here, and one of those things that I learned from going through some AI stuff when I was writing, and the analysis was you align with these people, these thinkers, not because they taught you anything, but you recognize you in them. And so the reason you gravitated to, because they gave you vocabulary for what you already believed. So really, I would suggest you almost approaching this like uh, a scout looking for talent. Everybody here can't play. Everybody here is not go play. The real question is when I walked in the room, am I going to find somebody who's trying to get to the next level as we define it, and they gravitate to you. And then you get a chance to have that old guy conversation, about how you think the game goes. So I kind of agree, not kind of agree, I totally agree with Charles that as crazy as it sounds, given how, we're talking about millions of people, you got to do it almost damn near one at a time. it's an organic relationship thing because there is no mass conversions. And even if everybody stood up and took the oath that night, ain't nobody gonna show back up next week, okay? Because they just got caught in a moment. What you're trying to help is the younger person, male, female, whatever, younger brother or sister, who's struggling to figure this out. And they know that the way we do it, have been doing it, ain't who they want to be. And they see in you somebody who's done it differently and seem to be different. And they want to know what you know. And then that's who you teach. Okay, you know, like it's like when somebody, if you're a vet and somebody is a rookie or a freshman and you were senior, and somebody says, "Can I work out with you?" And you say, "Sure." I'm here. I'm here every morning at 7. I'm gonna be here every morning at 7. Okay. The only question is, are you coming to the gym? Okay. And if you come to the gym, I'll treat you. And if you show up every time I show up, and I'm gonna treat you like you somebody trying to be a player, and we'll end up in a relationship. But if I tell you I'm here every day at 7, and you say, "Well, I can't make 7," well, shit, then I ain't the one then, because I'm gonna be here at 7. Okay, I'm not making the adjustment to you. You got to make the adjustment to me, but I'm obligated if you show up to teach, okay, and give you the benefit of my time in the game, and then you got to take that and then figure that out for what that's gonna mean for you, because you living in a different time.
You're gonna have to figure
That,
out that's just one of 3 workouts that I do every day anyway.
that right,
I'm
yeah,
gonna let
right,
you in on the one, but I'm working out 3 times a day, Playboy.
right. Yeah,
And
because that's how you get this good. Okay.
That's
that's
how
how
you
you get
get
this
good.
good. And but again, Gerald, like that that's why it ain't so again, that's why when all these people be talking about what we did back in the day, they lying. Because
Right,
it wasn't no bunch of people. Now,
right.
what we all have is exposure to this thing. And you know, and I think it's kind of, like, well, for me, it's easy. And so the we look at what black folks die of, right? So we die of heart disease, stroke, cancer, accidents, and
And,
respiratory illnesses,
and
right? So that we top 5. That's our top 5 kind of things, right? And so there's a life expectancy gap. This is what the research says. The number one cause of that life expectancy gap is racism.
Weathering.
And so this the weathering effect. So if I talk to somebody who tells me that racism is other than what it is, I quit talking to them. I don't have no reason to try to educate them. I don't have it because they got a position on it. If I encounter them and they already got a position on it, not only am I going to not talk to them about racism, I'm probably never going to talk to them again. They are not in my best interest or the masses.
There you go. That is so how do the issue we need to have a show on is how in the world do we get to the position to center ourselves in this scenario when our churches tells us, our churches are teaching us to put ourselves last.
You need a different church.
right.
I know. Our schools are telling us
If you
to
can, a
put
different
ourselves
school,
last.
but if you
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
you
Our society. Every movie we'll watch will base a black man's worth on their ability to lay their life down for the white antagonists. So I mean,
so look, what do you
indoctrinating
do with the preponderance, overwhelming?
over
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
over
yeah.
and over and over again.
Well, that's why you're looking for the young player that's already figured out that they don't want to be that. They just don't know how to be this.
Mhm.
And as you was saying that, and Charles, I was thinking the conversation that you really want. I'll use my basketball metaphor again. Uh, you're looking for the kid, the young player that's gonna come in and just come up to you and say, "Hey, man, I've been watching you, and that mid-range jumper you got when you go left and slide and pull up. How do you decide where the spot is? Ask me something about this." They say, I've read once that when Kobe met Michael Jordan, and it was in a game, and they were standing there, the first question he had that created the whole relationship. Kobe asked him on that turnaround jump shot, and when you're at the mid block, when you turn and fade, how do you determine the release point? Okay, I mean that's what he wanted to know. He
And
didn't
from
want
that
to
point forward, literally call him every day.
every day. They called him every day. He said, "I want to know. I got to turn around jump shot. And I can see the footwork, but the key is the release point, man. Where you got to know based on all of that. He had gotten it down to that point. So Michael's not talking. He's now talking to somebody who's already gotten himself positioned and trying to figure out how to be better. Okay, and I'm gonna be agree with Charles on this totally, man. That you got to be like Harriet Tubman, and you can't save. What's the comment that she made that she could have saved
Say
a
more.
thousand? Yeah, if they had realized they were slaves. You looking for the kid, and I don't mean kid literally, but you know what I'm saying. I'm saying it as an old guy. You looking for the young player that was looking for you. That was what you said. I don't know I know who he is or who she is. I don't know where they be, but if they show up in a space that I'm in, I'm gonna figure out how to connect. And those are the folks that you focus on, man.
And
And
And on that note, Doc, you want to add anything?
just two things, because I was channeling as you were speaking, Mike. I was channeling Kobe also for the exact same reason that you just spoke. But I also think Kobe is a good metaphor for your question, Gerald. What we saw in the career of Kobe Bryant is what it looks like when the weight of the media is against you. The media would tell you every week Kobe is he's a bad guy. He's a bad teammate. He ain't good for the game. He this, that, or the other. What you ain't gonna find is a vet that played with him or against him that got
or younger
anything
or younger player later. Or
to say,
younger
to
players
say this
later.
stuff. You ain't
Right.
gonna find it. You ain't gonna find it. And part of that reason was because Kobe didn't talk to them.
Right.
And so since he
He
ain't
kept to
talked to
himself.
them, right, but they would say stupid stuff when he got in the league. Well, he doesn't go out with the team. Kobe was 18. He couldn't go
Right.
out to the and so what he did was go to the gym. You talk to AI. AI say, I'm going to the club. Kobe say, I'm going to the gym. This was as an adult. And so this is what it looks like. And this is what it means to carry that weight. So to your point, it's an isolating space to do this, And so
Could I add to that? This is a Kobe thing. This is
mhm,
the Olympic team that he was on with LeBron and
mhm,
Carmelo, Wade, and all of them are young then.
mhm.
And they was in Las Vegas practicing, and they went out that like it stayed all night, and they got back about 4 o'clock in the morning. Right, they come in the hotel lobby, and Kobe is in the lobby on his way there. and he already sweating because he been in the weight room already, and he didn't say. And they said, "Where you going?" He said, "I'm headed back to the gym." And they looking at themselves because they tired and run down. They said, "Damn, I figured." And LeBron said, he didn't say, "Come on, y'all need to come go with me." He said, "That's why I'm going." He said, so the next night, there was everybody didn't go out. He said, and eventually, after about 3 days, didn't nobody go no place. Everybody was in the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning with Coke because they understood if you, all of them are extraordinary talent, but if you're serious about this business, this is how you handle it. I ain't asking nobody to do it. This is what I do.
You gotta want to.
You gotta want to, and if you don't want to, that's okay, man. Okay, I hope it work out for you. I mean, I seriously mean that, but I just don't think you can afford to be in the business of saving souls.
They
And
gotta
you
want
ain't
to.
you
Yeah.
ain't a social worker.
And the last thing that I got, Attorney Fields, is that today I think is the 75th or 78th anniversary or commemoration or what have you of Shelley versus Kramer.
Yes.
Oh wow!
Oh, okay.
And relative to what we just saw the Supreme Court do, um the Supreme Court in this case said, and I think this is another reason why we got to engage the history and we got to contextualize the history. The Supreme Court, they did not outlaw restrictive covenants. They said that if white folks don't want to sell to black folks, they ain't got to. If they want to collude and not sell to black folks, they can. But what can't happen is that the state facilitates that. So what we just saw is the state facilitating, the state in the form of the Supreme
The
Court,
federal government, yeah,
the
the
federal
federal
government.
government.
Yeah, we saw the federal government abusing the 14th Amendment in the same way that the state of Missouri and the state of Michigan and other cases at the time that Shelley was being held was supporting white supremacists in their efforts to exclude and diminish and demean the welfare of black folks. And so, but that's what this thing is we got to go back into the annals. We got to engage the history and we got to contextualize our fight so that we know where we are and why we here. Like we know where we are, how we got here, and what we can do to get out.
And remember, winter's coming.
And winter is
Winter's coming.
And you don't have to go far to see a full display on that because it is being prominently displayed at our history museum right now, in the Mill Creek exhibit. And we'll talk. The thing that I love about this show today, as we bring it to a close, is that we didn't give the white nationalists the attention that they thought they would have. This is the sort of attitude that gets you the win. Hell, we know what you're gonna do, but what we gonna do?
Yeah.
Because every time we fight, what happens? We win.
Win.
We win. So we want to thank you all for tuning into the Level Set, and we look forward to being in community with you all very soon. But fight. That's all we're saying. Fight. We win when we fight.
Oppressed people win when they resist.
That is correct. Every time.